Okay, we'll call the planning commission meeting to order. And we'll approve the minutes and the agenda for the minutes from the September 28th meeting. Are there corrections, additions, changes? Motion to approve. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Jerry's on TV. Okay, first ongoing business. I don't see any new business. We'll go to the Mark Bertelson request. Viva.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We want to first make sure our applicant is on the live stream. I just want to make sure Erica Schumacher has a good connection. She can hear us. Erica, are you there?
Yep, can you hear me?
Okay, sounds good.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, this is a request for a zone change from the FAR 1 to the FAR 2 zone districts on Outlaw D and F within the legendary Lutz and Tate Lake Site Second Edition flats. The property size, Outlaw D is a 20.45 acre parcel with approximately over 1,000 feet of water frontage. And Outlaw F is 8.5 acres with approximately 386 feet of water frontage, both on Tate Lake. Both parcels are split zoned with the Lakeshore residential zoning on the 300 feet abutting Tate Lake and FAR 1 zone district on the interior of the lots. The FAR 1 zone district is a 20 acre minimum lot size requirement, and the FAR 2 zone district is a 10 acre minimum lot size requirement. Tate Lake is classified as a special recreational development lake. This application requests to rezone 2 outlots on Tate Lake from FAR 1 to FAR 2. These lots are surrounded by FAR 2 and LSR zone districts already, which are generally more residential in use and smaller lots. This zone change would bring these parcels into more consistent zoning uses and density requirements as surrounding properties. The zone change would allow Outlaw D greater flexibility in subdividing the property and allow additional dwellings, 1 primary dwelling and 1 guest cabin per lot. The zone change would have no dimensional change to Outlaw F, since it would still be a substandard lot for the FAR 2 lot size requirements, but it would bring the permitted uses into alignment with surrounding properties. The background to these parcels contain the former Tate Lake Resort and have been in the Thornton Bowman family ownership since 1936. A significant portion of the family's property was sold to Irv Hansen in 1961, and Mr. Hansen subsequently established 2 developments in the area, including the legendary Lutz and Tate Lake Second Edition, an open space subdivision adjoining the applicant's parcel. Outlaw D and Outlaw F are within the legendary Lutz and Tate Lake Second Edition, which was created in 1997. While the plat was under review, a zone change was also reviewed and approved for 3 lots within the plat to be rezoned from FAR 1 to LSR. The minutes from the 1997 Planning Commission meeting indicate that the outlots were not included with the zone change. The minutes do not explain why these outlots were excluded. However, it appears that the goal was for all the platted lots, number 1 through 11, to have consistent LSR zoning. In 2009, Outlaw D was approved for a variance to create 2 substandard lots of 12 acres and 8.95 acres in the FAR 1 zone district. The decision notice for the variance states as follows. The decision by the Board of Adjustment to approve your variance request was based on your family's intent to preserve the property, inclusion of minimal footprints for proposed structures, and the creation of lots more closely reflecting adjacent zoning. It does not appear, however, that the administrative subdivision process was completed to effectuate this proposal. After the 3-year variance approval window passed, the variance approval was void. In reviewing this proposal, the property owner of Outlaw E was contacted and invited to participate in the rezoning of Outlaw E in conjunction with Outlaw D and F. He chose to abstain from the rezone process to keep his property FAR 1. Outlaw E is a substandard lot for both these zoning districts, so it makes no material difference to his property. I've included a survey from the 2009 variance that shows that 12 and 8 acre parcels. So if we're comparing these 2 zone districts, zoning considerations on page 9 of the packet, I included a table to kind of highlight the differences. So the items in brown are really the material differences between the FAR 1 and the FAR 2 zone districts. And then the things in blue are indicating similarities. Although the FAR 1 and 2 zone districts have similar requirements, when it comes to structural setbacks, building height, and permitted and conditional uses, there are some notable differences. The purposes are different. So the purpose of the FAR 2 zone district expressly identifies seasonal and permanent residences, whereas FAR 1 identifies its purpose for forest management, agriculture use, and recreational activity. The FAR 1 zone district has a couple of additional permitted uses, which includes dog kennels and sawmill operations as permitted uses, and also the minimum lot size area and lot width. On page 11 of your packets, I included the criteria for reviewing zone district map amendments, which is what this is under item D. So when going through this request, you can go through those questions to determine your findings. For public noticing, the application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on October 21st, 2022. 43 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments, Lutzen Township, and the DNR hydrologist. Land Services fielded several inquiry phone calls regarding this proposal, but no written comments were submitted during the written comment period. Staff recommendations for consideration. The previous plat and rezone approvals to surrounding properties and the 2009 variance approval of Outlot D indicate that the rezoning of Outlots E and F will bring these properties into more consistent zoning standards with the surrounding area. In reviewing the differences in the permitted uses between the two zone districts, the permitted uses of FAR2 are more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. There is a direct benefit to the neighboring properties to have the permitted uses of FAR2 instead of the permitted uses of FAR1. The rezoning would allow for Outlot D to be subdivided into 2 dwellings per parcel. However, the rezone would have no impact on Outlot F's potential density. I also included a map that showed the general zoning. So the blue on that map is LSR, the white is FAR1, and the orange is FAR2. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Does the person representing the family care to comment on anything?
I just thank you all for your time. This is really important to us as a family who has been coming up to the North Shore ever since I was born and long before that. So we really appreciate your time. I guess I don't have anything to add other than what we included in the packet, but I'm happy to stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to comment? Step forward. Hearing none, we'll close it to the public. And does anyone from the board wish to comment?
Fair deal. It looks like it fits the neighborhood better. Looking at the surroundings.
Anyone care to make a motion
I'll make a motion to approve
with the conditions
with the conditions.
that are spelled out?
If I may, Madam Chair, with the zone change, I didn't have any conditions.
Okay, the recommendation. Okay. All right, no conditions? Based on staff recommendations, that's what our motion is approving.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay,
Thank you very much, commissioners.
okay, we'll move on to B, which is the vacation rental ordinance amendments, public hearing. Tim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Including in your packets, you received the final report from the Vacation Rental Advisory Committee, which had been presented to the Board of Commissioners and then forwarded on to the Planning Commission here to review and to adopt or make recommendations with regards to proposed amendments to the ordinance. This is a process, we've been in front of you before. This is a process that's been long standing. Actually, it's been evolving since 2015. We adopted the ordinance first in 2019, which then took effect January 1st, 2020 for a 3-year period. It is the current ordinance is set to sunset at the end of December of this month. And we started this overall review process in April, figuring it wouldn't take this long to get through the process, but we wanted to make sure that we did get all of the perspectives in. We started out with we had that community perspectives survey, which drew in 500 and nearly responses. We did have a lot of discussions. The final committee ended up meeting over 12 hours in length of time for discussions. And so you have that report that's in front of you. Now, I will say that it is important to note that everybody pretty much understands, has been involved in this process, that this is not the end of all discussions. This isn't the end all be all. This is just another point in time where we looked at all of the issues that have come to the surface. Some of the issues back in 2015 and 2018, 19 aren't as much the issues anymore. There was a lot more discussion with regards to workforce housing and other things that kind of took precedence. And so we fully anticipate more changes will be coming as both the dynamics of vacation rentals change and how their impacts on the community. I will say that too, there's a lot of recommendations that came out in the final report that aren't in ordinance provisions because they're not ordinance related type changes. They're more policy changes. And so with regards to the lodging tax collection and such, we've made adjustments with that. With regards to the discussion doing caps and limits, we talked about actually a trigger phase, but that's not into the ordinance. That's actually a policy thing. So we are looking at, or we do have limits that are in there that if we hit a certain specific number, it'll trigger further discussion. And we decided to also put in a hard calendar date as a point of trigger to get back into the discussions as well. But understanding as well, there's an area involving the distinction between vacation rental homes and resort-based vacation rentals, that they're basically, the issues are a little different, the dynamics are different. And so that is kind of the next series of changes that we're going to come in to the planning commission and board commissions with, is kind of peeling off those two and having separate provisions for each of those. We couldn't put those and compile those together in time to get this because the time is short. If this basically has to be kind of passed out so that we can adopt it and get everything in place by the end of the year. So what I can do at this point is just kind of walk you through the changes that are in the ordinance or have been proposed. So the first thing, if you look at Article 2, 2.1D is the inclusion of the definition of current certificate of compliance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that is dealing with septic systems. And the county is taking on more the responsibility of the requirement of current and valid septic systems for all vacation rental operations, which we had previously left up to the state to do. So in Article 3, if you look at 3.2, we basically changed that timeline within which people had to bring their vacation rental licenses into compliance from the 5 months down to 60 days, because we wanted to start really cracking it on the enforcement portion of it to make sure that everybody is fully licensed as they ought to be. 3.5 is basically just kind of a logistical standpoint that describes how that renewal process will take place at the end of each year. This year is going to be a little different because we like to have that renewal process go from December through January to give people that 2-month time frame in that. Now, because the new ordinance isn't taking effect or wouldn't take effect until January 1st, we were pushing that timeline off to start in January. And so we won't start with the renewals until January. And that way we know that the program is going to be modified in the way that it is being proposed. Article 5 in 5.1A, where you have some additions, the blue underline there, adding Lutz and Mountaintop District and Schroeder mixed use. Those are just ones that had been inadvertently left out in previous editions. That's not any change really. That's just an identification of language that is and has currently been in the zoning ordinance as well. So if you go down to section 5.4, A lot of the discussion kind of centered around as well response time and wanting to make sure that if people have any issues or complaints or concerns, we had in there that, people, we do have a complaint hotline, number, and we're going to feature that more prominently on the website. But also we had the requirement where people had to, the owners, or caretakers had to respond within a certain amount of time. But we said response is just acknowledging what the problem is, and then they had additional time to be able to correct that problem. This changes it to mean that they have to be able to physically respond to an issue within that 3-hour time frame instead of just acknowledging that there is an issue. So we wanted to make sure that, if somebody's down in the CDs or elsewhere and they're renting someplace up here, that there is at least some sort of local person that would be able to respond to whatever complaints, and that it's just not left up in the air for others to be able to have to handle. 5.45 is an additional one, and what that is the requirement for the placement of a placard inside each of the units that's being rented that has the identification of the emergency contact information, the location. Some of these places, the people don't know what the addresses are. And so if they call in to law enforcement, if there's an emergency, there's been issues in terms of people even knowing where they're at. So they're going to be responsible for placing a placard up, which will have the important information and also information important for garbage disposal and septic system use and things like that. So that's an additional requirement. There was a concern that had been discussed with regards to lake surface water usage. Those types of operations, if it's meets the Minnesota Department of Health, hotel motel stuff, there's a lot of disinfectants, a lot of processing and stuff that has to be done. And some of these operations aren't required to get a Minnesota Department of Health license. So they've kind of fallen through those cracks. So we wanted to make sure that if anybody is getting a license from us, that they would have to get either abide by Minnesota Department of Health standards or get an approval by us in conjunction with Minnesota Department of Health. And Minnesota Department of Health has acknowledged, they sat in on some of the meetings, and they have acknowledged that they're kind of expanding their ability to work with us in the tracking of all of these operations as well. Article or section 5.65 is where I had initially discussed the certificate of compliance. Previously, we had, because we were over inundated with an enforcement program that we had already in place, our Lakeshore Septic Compliance Program, where we would inspect all the systems on a lake and give everybody 2 years to upgrade and then go on to lake. And we ended up with actually hundreds of failing systems that needed to be upgraded. So we stopped that program, and we've been kind of catching up and tooling down in terms of getting those systems into compliance. Now that we have pretty much mopped all that up, we're ready to take that responsibility back from the state. And so we're adding in the requirement that any new or any licensed facility or operation have a current certificate of compliance. That's one of the issues that the Minnesota Department of Health had, is that they would accept a certificate of compliance, but that certificate of compliance could be 20 years old, which is out of date. So there's they have a drop dead date or an expiration date, which it's after a new system in so many years and after a system's been inspected in so many years. But then once it's past that date, they would have to get the new certificate of compliance. So it was important that that all systems have a current certificate of compliance. And so that requirement was put in there. In Article 5.8, license transfer, and I'm going to change one of the words right here in my discussion with our attorney and through Minnesota County Insurance Trust, where it says the vacation rental license may not be transferable. Instead of may not, we want that to be shall not. It's the same thing. It's just it's more emphatic. It leaves no room. And basically, it was the consensus of the committee that they didn't want to have the license just automatically transfer upon the sale of property, that they wanted a new license so that the new owner would be completely up to speed with all of the requirements that they have. And then if you look at Article 6, under enforcement, 6.4 is a listing of revocation process. So we always had the ability to revoke a license, but we added in those provisions in there to kind of go through that process of what it looks like to go through a license revocation process. So if there is an enforcement issue, we can proceed towards revocation, be able to pull that license. Under Article 8, and this would be the last one, is we struck out, there was, like I said, a drop dead date. So this ordinance, basically the current one in its form, it expires at the end of this year. So we actually have to re-adopt the whole ordinance. And so once we do, we're not adding in another drop dead date. We're just basically adopting it, and then we'll be changing it as needed as we go through, much like our zoning ordinance. We come back periodically to change the zoning ordinance or other ordinances. We would do the same thing with this. So those are the proposed amendments, and just turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on the ordinance changes? Okay, anyone from the, we'll close it to the public comment and public hearing. From the board,
Madam Chair,
yes.
I just want to express my gratitude for the many hours and all the hard work that the committee put in reviewing this and discussing and working with the Department of Health. We've had lots of discussion in the community, and this is a huge step forward. So I just want to thank everyone for their work on this.
Thank you. And Mike, do you have anything you wish to add?
No, I agree with Ann. They put a lot of work into this. I think it would take some looking at.
I agree with Ann, and that being part of that committee, that was a really good, diverse group of people that know a lot about what we're talking about here, and this was great. I do have one question for Tim on 5.65. If a current license holder commits a request for a compliance and is found for some reason not to have a compliance system, will they be allowed any grace period to bring that into compliance, or will they not be allowed to operate until it's in compliance?
We will follow Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's timelines with regards to bringing non-compliant systems into compliance.
Because as one of the contractors, I know we're still behind, so. Anyhow, so that was a little bit of a concern. You know, there's a reasonable grace period or time for them to bring it into compliance.
Yeah, and the way that it is, Madam Chair, and Commissioner LeBoda, it is 10 days for, you know what the deadlines are. You have 10 days. If it's an imminent threat to public health, you have a much more expeditious time frame in which you have to correct that system. And then there's 10 months to be able to fix it. And then there's just standard non-conformities that don't impact health and safety that are a lot of longer time frames. So yes, we would follow those.
As long as they're not able in public health threat, they likely be able to continue their operation as long as they're active. Coming into compliance.
Actively coming into compliance. That's it.
I have a question about how many complaints have been brought to your attention on vacation rentals, that just unlicensed people that are conducting business as a vacation rental? How many have been addressed by Land and Services?
Well, that is a good question, Madam Chair, and I'll have to say that actually during this process and the way that we had publicized it, we've been on the radio talking about it, we've had the public survey that had gone out, there's been social media discussions on it, there's been a lot more complaints that have come in during and after any of those, kind of public engagements than there has been on our complaint line. Our complaint line, and that's why we want to feature it more prominently on our website. The complaint line has been used more predominantly for inquiries on how to be able to get licensed or whatever. There've been very few actual complaints. And I will say that after hours, somebody, if there's a noise complaint or something, would contact the sheriff's office, law enforcement center. We might not get that feedback. They don't know who all of the vacation rental operations are, but we're working to make that link so that we can have a good current list in terms of if there are any complaints that are sent to law enforcement, that we would get those included as well.
Okay, so you didn't really answer my question. Have
Well-
there been any valid complaints that have been dealt with by Land and Services with vacation rentals in the last 2 years?
Well, the complaints have been, they're operating without a license. So yes, we have gotten those complaints in and we have reached out to those that have operated and did not have their license, and we have did bring those into compliance. And I do know we have Joseph Ruth, who has been administering the program within the department. Joseph, do you want to chime in with providing any further addition information?
Well, as Tim stated, we get probably an equal number of inquiries from people who are interested in getting a vacation rental license as we do with complaints, but few in either case. We've had one type of complaint is that the vacation rental property is not either adequately identified by address, or there's been some problems with renters actually going into a neighbor's home thinking they were in the rental property. And we've tried to work with them, with people on making sure that the website adequately describes exactly where the rental property is at. We've had one property where the neighbors have a burn, basically a fire ring, and in the homeowners association where they're located, they're supposed to have the fire out by 11 p.m. and a couple times it's gone past there. So that's been we had one or two complaints on the same property, but and as Tim said, we also have had people notify us that a property's been operating a vacation rental without a license. In one case, there was a recreational vehicle that was being used for a vacation rental. And this activity is prohibited not only in the vacation rental ordinance, but also in the zoning ordinance in section 5.17, where it describes the regulations surrounding recreational vehicles. So, and we've sent letters out notifying the owners, and the activity has since stopped.
Okay, and we're not going to address anything as far as resorts, people renting resort properties. That's another day.
Well, we do within our definition, Madam Chair, we have the definition that includes those units in a resort that are not managed by the management company. Caribou Highlands is a good example, where you have units that are in the resort, but they're not managed by Caribou Highlands. They're managed either by a management company or they're managed by themselves. And that is, we currently do license those individually. We identify and license those. However, that's what I was indicating that we're going to be going to next in that area. We've already started discussions in a smaller group to talk about what kind of provisions we can have distinct and separate from vacation rental homes and resort-based vacation rentals.
I got one more question. What have we gained by putting this ordinance in place as a common? We now know some of the vacation rentals, we've identified them. Now what? I wasn't in favor of this, and I just think we're way beyond what's needed here. And now the fee is $400, and it was $200. They have to get a Minnesota license, and I believe that's $365. So there's close to $800 spent each year for licensing and monitoring, and that's like at least 4 days rental. Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That's a good question. I was only silent because I wasn't expecting that question, but it is a good question, and I would say that what it does is kind of strike that balance. One of the first discussions that we had in the committee was, what is the goal of this? What is the whole goal of the program? And that is to be able to have people exercise their rights and abilities to go ahead and rent their property as they see fit, but still being able to mitigate whatever adverse impacts there may be on the community. And the whole basis that we have as counties that's governed by Minnesota statute, how we can adopt ordinances is all based on health, safety, and welfare of the community at large. And so by looking and making sure that the septic systems are operating correctly or up to speed is arguably a good protection for the surface waters of our county. We've gone through upgrades where we've done our lakeshore septic compliance program and had everybody correct around the lake. And then years later, we take water monitor sampling and have found the eutrophic statuses and water qualities improve after we've done that. So I think markedly we can demonstrate where there's an improvement by virtue of compliant septic systems. Also protection of the public by having this lake surface water. There's not a lot of those systems that are out there, but there are. And so having it identified and being able to deal with that can be public health protecting in terms of somebody not getting some bad water or some things like that. So it's a balance, and that's what the committee wanted to do. There's a lot in here. Where especially if you look at all 580 responses of that survey, people wanted us a lot further in terms of restricting, and there are some of those responses that wanted to eliminate vacation rentals altogether. They say we just prohibit it, we ban them altogether. So this is trying to strike that balance between, again, having people being able to do their rights on their property, but still mitigating for adverse impacts.
I haven't heard of a great value established yet. It's all covered under other ordinances that I can tell, but I'm one. And I'll, is this now, we set a date for reviewing it. Now, this is a permanent ordinance forever, is that correct? Until it would be repealed.
That is correct, Madam Chair. Every ordinance is permanent. This has been the only one that we've ever done since I've been here in 24 years. That's had a sunset date on it. But we have repealed the ordinances also since I've been here. So that's
I just want to understand the ramifications of what we're voting on.
Yeah, and Commissioner Hanker is also on.
Great. Did you have anything to comment, Jared? He's probably.
Did you have any comments, Jerry?
Okay.
Okay.
I heard him. I think he's there.
He's there.
Yes. Okay, all right. He's probably on mute. Any other discussion, Ann?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to state when looking at the cost for the license, we talk about it's double, it's gone from 200 to 400. But just in some of the properties that I checked out or investigated, many of them were earning as much as $390 to $450 a night for rental. And so I don't think that fee is out of the ballpark. I think from my perspective, it's quite reasonable and maybe a little on the low side. But I really admire the fact we've looked at that, that we have set some parameters and moving in a good direction. And there was great discussion by just a wide variety of people. I was real impressed. So.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, I'll ask for a motion.
Motion to accept.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
All right. I think we can adjourn the planning commission meeting.
Second it.
So is Jerry gonna run the,
Yeah, Jerry, we've adjourned the planning commission. You're gonna chair the, board of adjustment?
Yep.
We're ready to begin with that.
Okay, let's, we will adjourn or we will open the Board of Adjustment meeting now for October 26th. Yeah, get the dates right. I would entertain a motion for accepting the agenda and approving the minutes.
A motion to accept the agenda and approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes and the agenda as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, carried. First issue of order, A, let me open that up. And we have an application from parcel ID 54-103-4470. Neil Hegland from Darwin, Minnesota. Neva?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application is being represented by his agent, Jeff Oberg. It's a variance request for relief from the zoning ordinance to place a principal structure at a reduced rear yard lines, lot line setback where a minimum of 50 feet is required, and also to place the principal structure at a reduced top of bluff setback 10 feet where a minimum of 30 feet is required. It's also in the bluff impact zone. The property includes 1 acre, it is entirely contained within the R1 zone district, single family residential. Newly created lots in the R1 zone districts, not on Lake Superior, must be 2 acres in size and 200 feet wide at structural setback. The property is within the North Shore Management Zone of Lake Superior, and Neil Hegland is a current property owner. There's currently a purchase agreement signed with Jeff Oberg. The applicant, Jeff Oberg, is requesting relief from the rear lot line setback and the top of bluff setback to place a principal structure. The dimensions of the building size is 12 feet by 20 feet or 12 feet by 30 feet. The variance requests a 10-foot setback from the rear lot line and 10 feet from top of bluff, which would provide relief for approximately a 12-foot wide building width. The structure placement would also be 10 feet within the bluff impact zone. The bluff area standards of the general requirements of the zoning ordinance state that no structure shall be allowed in the bluff impact zone, and the setback from the top of bluff shall be 30 feet. As a reminder, the bluff impact zone means area from a bluff and lands located within 20 feet to the top of the bluff. For background, the lot date backs to at least 1948 when it was transferred from the school district to the town of Colville. Mr. Hegland purchased it from Cook County at a land auction in 1997. The lot meets the standards for a non-conforming lot of record. The current owner, Neil Hegland, was approved for a variance in 2004, which allowed a variance from the rear lot line setback to build a home at 10 feet from the rear lot line. The 2004 variance approval was in approximately the same location as this 2022 variance request. However, the bluff was not identified in the 2004 variance process and was not included in the variance relief. The bluff setback requirement was in effect at that time. Please refer to page 5 for the site sketch plan from the 2004 variance, which illustrates the property features. Currently, the property is undeveloped except for a very steep driveway going up the bluff feature to access the proposed building site. There are limited parking options available at the top of the bluff. At the top of bluff, there's a power line. The application from the 2004 variant suggests there's a 15-foot setback from the center of the Arrowhead Cooperative power line. The photo on page 4 shows an aerial photo of the property with a black area indicating the bluff with a slope of 30% or greater. The site sketch from 2004 on page 11 of the packet or page 5 of the report was included from the 2004 variance just to show where that power line is oriented on the site, and also that it suggests that there's a power line easement on the site. I think it's important that this 2004 sketch recognized that It isn't to scale, and I don't think that 2004 applicant probably had a very accurate representation from where the power line is to the rear lot line. And I'm not sure that there's quite that much space there. For site considerations, for the septic, the concept plans indicate the property owner proposes to have a small cabin with a holding tank. Environmental Health Officer Mitch Everson has provided a technical memo and review of this proposal, which is enclosed. The memo recommends that the applicant contact the licensed septic designer to verify the existing landscape will allow for the installation of a septic system. Impervious surface coverage should not exceed 25% of the lot. For wetlands, there are wetlands on site that feed into a ravine. This wetland and ravine feature prohibits access to developing the north corner of the lot. The maps on pages 4 and 5 indicate the approximate wetland location. For slope and geology, the reddish rock outcropping forming the bluff appears to be a rhyolite type rock, which fragments off as individual shingles during erosion. The photo at the top of page 8 shows the bluff crumbling angular rocks at the base. The bluff bisects the property paralleling Highway 61. The application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on October 21st. 15 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments and the DNR hydrologist. No comments were received in land services. Please refer to Mitch Everson's memo enclosed discussing the septic. For staff recommendations for consideration, this property exhibits many challenges to development. A good solution to this difficult lot is if additional land could be purchased from the abutting property owner to extend the rear lot line further north, which would provide additional space for development and put less stress on the bluff impact zone. There is no conforming location on this lot due to the small lot size, the Highway 61 setback, the bluff feature, and the R1 rear lot line setback requirement. The 130-foot setback from Highway 61 extends to the toe of the bluff, eliminating any conforming locations below the bluff. At the top of the bluff, the 30-foot bluff top setback and the 50-foot rear yard setback eliminate any conforming location at the top of the bluff. Additionally, as indicated in the 2004 site sketch, it is likely that there is an easement for the power line that the property owner will need to be observant of. If partial or full variance approval is granted, development on this lot will need to be precise in meeting any conditions of approval. A 1997 survey indicates the 2 northerly corners were set and capped as property pins. Staff recommends the applicant or their agent navigates to these pins and flags the actual rear property line on the ground to measure the variance related to any proposed improvements. The variance application indicates that the zoning administrator determined the narrowest width between the top of bluff and property line is 32 feet. However, this was a preliminary assessment and not based on property pins or connecting flagging. Before any development can be approved, the property owner should first consult a licensed septic designer to verify the existing landscape will allow for the installation of a septic system. If approved, the following conditions may be attached to this variance request. 1, the property shall conform to the Cook County septic requirements and Minnesota State Rule 7080. Prior to any land use permit being issued, a septic designer shall provide adequate documentation to the environmental health officer that the property can accommodate a septic system. Number 2, no development within the 10-foot top of bluff. Number 3, vegetation within the bluff impact zone shall be retained except for the building footprint of the variance relief. Number 4, the site development must conform to the Cook County Stormwater Management Ordinance and have a site design plan with an erosion and sediment control plan or a stormwater management plan to the satisfaction of the county prior to the issuance of the land use permit. Number 5, structure height shall be limited to 25 feet. This would be in accordance with the 2004 variance approval. Number 6, structure footprint shall be limited to 12 by 20. Number 7, drainage shall be directed to the existing wetlands or ravine runoff area. And number 8, prior to any permits being issued, it is the property owners or their agent's responsibility to identify their property corners and flag the rear lot line to determine adequate setback is present. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. I believe our applicant is online on Zoom.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay, Mr. Goldberg, do you wish to comment further?
No, I don't really have a lot to add. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, board. I don't have a lot to add. I think that was a really great summary. I think, it talked about the history and what our objective is, and our original plan was just to ask for renewal of the original variance, and then the bluff was discovered, which created another challenge. But looking at that property, we've looked at it quite a few different times and trying to find a a location to find something that would be buildable. And in looking at all the locations, we really can't find anything that really works, other than what we're asking for. So our objective is just a small cabin, a seasonal cabin that would be used only a couple of times a year. As far as septic goes, that would be a long ways down the road. We're just looking for for something to be used, like I said, a couple of times a year. So we wouldn't really be looking at doing anything other than a little cabin for, for definitely not in the foreseeable future. So I don't really have a lot to add other than we're, looking at potential septic sites. Think that was proposed back previously that there could be a potential septic site down a little bit lower, but yeah, that's, I think just due to, there's such a challenge with this property due to the topography of the land and challenges for if there would ever need to be a septic site later. But like Neva mentioned, we're just looking for building like a 12 by 20 or 12 by 30, just a very small seasonal cabin, like I mentioned. And I think that's about the only location we have. Neva mentioned that 32-foot was the worst case scenario. I think we would try to position that to, if approved, we try to position that maybe a different spot to gain a little more distance from either the bluff or the back property line. But we were going to ask for a worst case scenario type situation. If you look at on page 18 of that packet that you have, that's where we're kind of proposing where it would make sense to do it. If you go any further to the up and to the right, you're kind of getting into where that driveway would come in. And of course, we've got to consider all the other parts that Neva mentioned in regards to the power line and so on. So that's really about the only practical location we could come up with. So, but thank you for your consideration. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. That helps a lot. It is a difficult plot to work from. I go by it every day. It's not far from my place. And I've often looked at that road going up there wondering, what do you take up there? You need a tramway. You don't need a car. Okay. Well, thank you. Are there any others in attendance that would like to speak to this issue? Hearing none, I'll assume that we're ready to consider it as a board. So we'll close the comments from the public, and if we have more questions for you, we'll come back to you. In the meantime, it's to the board now, and board members, what are your feelings on this? No comment.
No, I of course have a comment. I would be more comfortable if there were an actual current survey with the surveyor laying out what could meet the criteria we're talking about. They will do that. And then we'd all know whether it can be 12 feet wide, maybe it can be 14 feet wide. I'm comfortable with the 10 feet back from the rear. And I could live with the 10 feet from the front, but can it really fit in there? I don't know. And then septic, if you're gonna have something that's habitable, you need a septic of some sort, either a outhouse or holding tank or something. Any
Okay.
consideration to water? Carry-in?
I'm sorry, was that a question? I apologize. I didn't hear that.
Water, is it just carry-in?
Yeah, that would be our original plan. Maybe, and like you said, probably just some kind of an outhouse or a portable toilet of some sort at this point. Like I said, 1 or 2 times a year, it probably isn't worth the expense of putting in a well or anything. So, I mean, that would be our short-term plan, but obviously we need to think about where that potentially could go in the future. But maybe a holding tank down the road for minimal use is something I talked with Neva about, and just to see if we could put some kind of a holding tank in there would certainly be desired as well down the road. But for the time being, we're just looking to, like I said, put just the cabin, hoping to take this in those steps.
Okay. Is there anybody else with comments?
I think, I guess, I'm looking, are we on our proposal?
Ours.
I'm looking at the proposed, conditions, and I think the proposed conditions really address the concerns I have with the property. So if they can go through and meet those conditions, I guess I'm okay with it. I don't see it as. This is obviously unique to the property, it's a unique parcel.
Right.
And relatively unbuildable without this request, so.
Right.
With the conditions as written, I'm comfortable with it.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Go ahead.
One thing in crafting these conditions, I have spoken a lot with the applicant about, let's see how this variance is reviewed before the Board of Adjustment. But he's gone into this with the full knowledge that there's a chance that if this got approved with these conditions, that he may follow these conditions and end up realizing that it's not feasible for this development to take place, like the septic designer criteria, for example. There's other variances that earlier on, we at the staff level have required more septic information to bring that to you because that changes so much in the variance outcome. But in the interest of time and with this purchase agreement, the applicant was comfortable with moving forward with this level of detail. With the full knowledge that it's very possible that if this variance got approved under these conditions, he could have a septic contractor come out and say, we can't actually place a septic tank up there, or it's going to require something pretty unique. And he's willing to kind of cooperate and figure out what that looks like. And he has the full knowledge that that may end up being coming back for another variance request and revising what this looks like. So I just kind of wanted to explain that to everybody is that I know this level of detail is pretty more sparse than what is ideal. It's kind of a timing issue and trying to see how this would pan out. But that's kind of the thought behind these conditions is that they are pretty strictly written and there's a pretty high bar. So there's a lot of work on the applicant's side if this got approved to meet all those conditions before he could even get the land use permit for the variance approval.
Thank you. Any further comments? Or is there any action recommended?
With that, I would motion to approve with the 8 conditions as written.
I second it.
That's a motion then?
Yes.
Okay,
With conditions.
all right, accept that. Is there a second?
I seconded it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this with the conditions as specified and with all the understanding that we now have of it. Are there any other comments to be made before we take the vote? Hearing none, I'll assume we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Carried. Thank you.
Thank you,
Got a
board.
project in your hands.
Thank you, board.
Okay, next. If I can go back. Oops, get here. Here we go. Patrick Sullivan. A variance request for relief from Cook County zoning ordinance number 37, section 7.05 to place 2 accessory structures, a sauna and a storage shed in a reduced ordinary high water level setback from Deer Yard Lake where a minimum of 100 feet is required. This is parcel ID 51-128-2117, 250 East Deer Yard Road. Lot 7-17A of lot 6, also known as east 100 foot of west 900 foot of lot 6, section 28, township 61, north range 2 west. Case number 2022-225V, Neva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant, Patrick Sullivan, is requesting relief from the shoreline setback requirements of Deer Yard Lake to place two accessory structures, a sauna and a storage shed on the property at 250 East Deer Yard Road. The 10 by 11 sauna is proposed to be placed 64 feet 11 inches from the shoreline, and the 21-foot 3-inch by 13-foot 3-inch storage shed is proposed to be placed 61 feet and 9 inches from the shoreline. Both proposed structures are in locations that either historically or currently have had accessory structures placed. The applicant purchased the property in 2006. In 2011, the applicant applied for and received a variance to modify and expand the grandfathered non-conforming cabin. The parcels along East Deer Yard Lake Road are not platted, but were created prior to zoning regulations and are therefore legal non-conforming lots of record. The proposed storage shed will replace the existing 8 by 8 storage shed on the east side of the lot. The proposed sauna will be located where a previously placed 10 by 16 shed was located on the west side of the lot near the parking area. The vegetation, there is a healthy vegetative buffer between the proposed structures and Deer Yard Lake, which provides visual screening from the lake. The septic passed compliance inspection in October 2022. There are no issues with impervious surface coverage. The proposed structures are in locations where previous impervious surface coverage is located. There are no issues with wetlands, and the parcel is sloped with drainage towards Deer Yard Lake. The application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on October 21st, with 21 letters of notification sent out to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments and the DNR hydrologist. One comment was submitted prior to the comment deadline by Jim Malters, which supported the variance request. If approved, the following conditions may be attached to the variance request. The property shall conform with Minnesota Rule 7080 and Cook County septic requirements, and no vegetation shall be removed from the shoreline impact zone. And I believe our applicant is here in person, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is the applicant available to speak to this? Have you any comments?
Yes, I do.
All right, go ahead. Microphone and speak with your name and identification.
Patrick Sullivan. And thank you for considering my request. The only comment I'd like to make is the previous owner had established a Firewise plan on the property, which I have maintained since I bought the property in 2006. So currently the area immediate around the cabin, including the two building sites, are cleared of trees for that plan. The only alternative building sites are on the north end of the property, which is north of Deer Yard Road. That portion of the property is heavily wooded and has a much steeper slope than the proposed building sites. So if I'm allowed to build on the proposed building sites, I can avoid clearing additional trees, and I can avoid any significant excavation of the property.
Okay. Thank you for that. Board have any questions of him at this point? Hearing none. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to comment on this particular project?
I would like to.
I'm sorry.
Stanley Toll, I live 264 East Deer Yard. I'm just a little ways past Mr. Sullivan's house. There's just a few comments I want to make. His 2011 variance set into motion a lot plan based around the variance for the house. And the lots back there are tight and difficult to build on. I understand his need for the variance. I will say he has been absolutely respectful of shoreline. The full aerial photo you have is 2018. It's too bad you don't have something a little more current, because the shoreline is truly filling in to be spectacular, in my opinion. A few things he did do for the initial variance to build was he actually surveyed
properly surveyed a lot on east end of Deer Yard Lake, which to all the rest of the neighbors is kind of exciting because most of us never knew where our property lines were. And he suffered through spending all that money to help a lot of us out figure out where we were. And he did build strictly with local contractors, which I was pretty impressed with because he kind of said he would during the variance application. But it was local people, local lumber, it was all locally built. I was pretty proud of that. He's been a good neighbor and I'm in full support of these variances. I don't see any damage to anything going on, so. If that helped, good. If it didn't help, just ignore it.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Is there anybody else out there that wishes to speak to this issue? Hearing none, I will close it to the public and withdraw it back to the board. So board members, what do you think about this project? Charlie, you look like you're ready.
I think it really will fit the site well. He's building an existing clearing and the existing site from the buildings. And I'm in support of it.
Okay.
I'm just questioning whether the side yard setback can be met for the new storage building. Because the aerial photograph looks like the line goes right down the side. Where existing, and I can't tell if it's.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Board of Adjustment Member Maschenbacher, page 41 of 77 on the packet, there's a proposed site plan that the applicant provided that does include all the setbacks and is showing that he is meeting the side yard setbacks for both of those structures.
Okay, any further comment here? Or a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
Motion has been made to approve it with any conditions specified. Is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this with whatever conditions are specified. Are there any further comments? Hearing none, I'll assume we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Another project ready to go. Okay, now we got one more here. I'll load up on my screen and here we go. Make it a little bigger. All right, now we have Dan and Ashley Bridamus from 12586 Gunflint Trail with a request. Parcel ID is 49-630-2230. And there's a variance request for relief from Cook County zoning ordinance number 37, section 7.14A to replace a dwelling within the bluff impact zone where structure placement is prohibited within the bluff impact zone. Neva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant, Ashley Bredimus, is requesting relief from the Bluff Development Standards to place a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, 2.5 story or 1,800 square foot dwelling on the bluff and within the bluff impact zone on their water access property at Camp Birchwood for Boys on the Siegel River. The structure will be located towards the lower half of the bluff above the floodplain of the river and outside of the 100-foot structure setback of the river. The structure is proposed to be connected to the existing septic system and be a fully functional house with a year-round habitation. The Cook County zoning ordinance standards for bluff area development states that no structure shall be allowed within the bluff impact zone. And as a reminder, the bluff impact zone is the area that includes the bluff and land located within 20 feet from the top of bluff. Currently, this property is a seasonal youth camp that has been owned and managed by the applicant's family for several generations. Ms. Redimus's goal is to be able to live year-round at the property in their proposed home location. The applicant approached Land Services this fall to inquire about the home build project, during which time a few other permitting issues came to staff's attention. Staff have been working with the applicant to address unpermitted structures and septic management issues, which are still underway. 2 structures were identified, which will be coming forward for review to the BOA in December 2022. The water slide and platform tent at the top of this bluff. However, in the interest of time, this initial request is before the Board of Adjustment as a separate request. For the septic, this property has an existing on-site septic system that is non-compliant. The existing septic system is an advanced type 4 system that requires annual operation and maintenance services. Environmental health records indicate that these services have not been provided since 2015. Please refer to Mitch Everson's memo enclosed, further explaining the septic needs. Impervious surface coverage, there are no issues with impervious surface coverage. National Wetland Inventory indicates a large wetland complex bisecting the property. The star indicates on the map on page 4 of the staff narrative, the approximate location of the proposed dwelling. I included the bluff analysis that I did for this site just because I wanted to clarify that this feature does absolutely fall under the bluff definition, and so that can help explain to you how staff comes to that review. For public noticing, the application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on October 21st. 23 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners as well as county departments and the DNR hydrologist. 1 comment letter was received during the public comments by Dewey Philman, which had full support of the request. I did receive 1 late comment, which was received after the public comment deadline, so that is not included in the record. Please refer to Mitch Everson's memo regarding the improvement for septic needs. The bluff setback standards help to minimize visual impacts from structures and to provide general slope protection from construction activities. The minimum setback standards do not provide sufficient protection for structures adjacent to geologically or hydrologically unstable slopes and stream banks. In this instance, the applicant is claiming that the location of the proposed structure is on a geologically stable granite ledge rock. Additionally, building on and into the bluff will decrease the visual impact in comparison to building on top of the bluff. The lack of annual maintenance to the advanced septic system is an item that needs serious attention by the property owners, especially if additional usage is being proposed. The practicalities of developing a water access only lot for permanent residents lends towards the need of the dwelling to be closer to the water where boats and snowmobiles can easily serve the need of the dwelling. Building further back inland without the benefit of roads and vehicles does add an element of complexity for usage and maintenance. If approved, the following conditions may be attached to this variance request. Number 1, site development must conform to the Cook County Stormwater Management Ordinance and have a site plan with an erosion and sediment control plan or stormwater management plan to the satisfaction of the county prior to the issuance of a land use permit. Number 2, the existing non-compliant septic system shall be brought into compliance with Minnesota state rules and Cook County health regulations. The septic system design shall be approved prior to the issuance of a land use permit. The property shall conform to Minnesota Rule 7080 and the Cook County septic requirements. No vegetation shall be removed from the shoreline impact zone, and the cabin shall be earth toned or neutral in color. We did a site visit, coordinated on this site. I understand it was a difficult one for people to be able to access. So I did include some photos in the staff narrative to try to illustrate this bluff feature because the geology of the site does become very helpful in understanding the potential impact. And also, Board of Adjustment member Kiseki and Commissioner Ann Sullivan were present on site and can lend their direct experience as well. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is the owner or a representative available for any comments on this? Okay,
Well, first of all, thank you for those who were able to come visit and thank you all for being
could I
here.
ask you to identify yourselves first?
Oh, yeah, I'm Ashley Bredimus.
I'm Dan Bredimus.
This is my dad. My husband is sitting over there. He's not an owner of the property, but this is for he and I, my husband and I. But thank you for not postponing this meeting. It's an adventure just to get to where we live, as those who visited know. And I couldn't blame anybody for not coming out there. It's not accessible by road. We take a boat. This property is like, was mentioned, has been in my family since 1968, so it's a very special place. And my husband and I would like to build a house so we can start a family. We currently live in a cabin an eighth of the size of this building. And so this proposed location, we would like to build there because it does fit in with the natural surrounding, unlike a lot of the houses in the neighborhood are on top of bluffs. There's a lot of bluffs. That's kind of the commonality in the neighborhood. This would be very well blending in, and we would eagerly accept all of the conditions that are outlined there. What else am I forgetting?
Some of the non-compliant issues that we're dealing with, the septic system. My father first came to this location in 1949 with kids and purchased the property in 68. And he owned it until his death, in which case my brother owned it. And neither of those people ever lived here or worked here. They hired other people. And so unfortunately, a lot of the infrastructure wasn't taken care of. The septic system wasn't kept up to date. But we understand what it needs to take place to get it up to date. And we're in the process of making those changes, and this will be their life's work going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any questions from the board members? At this point? None. Okay, just remain in reserve there. Let's open the floor. Are there any others from the public that wish to comment on this project? Hearing none, I'll assume that there are no other comments, and I'll close it. Yes?
Excuse me, Chairman. The other comment that I have is that if you look at the plot of the whole property that we own, it seems quite large. Even though we own about 66 acres, it's only the front two along the river that are usable for us. And this is a children's camp, and we belong to the American Camping Association, and they recommend that we not build a residence right in the middle of camp. It's preferred for it to be off to one side. To our south is the septic system, which isn't the most desirable place, even though it's a little farther away from where the kids are. And the other location is the location that we're proposing. We're not too concerned about the bluff impact zone as far as erosion. It's all a granite bluff. It's not visible from the river unless you know what you're looking for through the trees. So it's not a big obtrusive structure that we're proposing here.
And the septic system is on one side of the property and electric is on the other side of the property. So it's, it provides a challenge there. What do you want? You want septic? You want electric? We want both. And Mitch Everson and Scott Robinson have been working with us to make the septic go to the location that is closest to the electric so that both are possible. And as my dad was saying, having the house on one side of the camp, but also being close enough at the same time that if something were to go wrong, you know, the directors were right there. And so this particular location is right there. And it is also accessible by snowmobile, by boat, without having to make any new roads in the camp as well.
Okay, well, thank you for that additional information. Does that stir any other questions from the rest of the board? Sounds like we're in pretty good shape there. There's nobody else to speak to this. So I will close it to the floor and bring it to the board. Board members, speak your piece now. Or make a motion.
Can we add a condition that there's no excavation for this property, for this building structure? Or is that not necessary?
Can you repeat that?
Huh?
It might be for a septic.
For the house?
No, for a septic.
Well, I know that, but I'm talking about the home they want to build.
Yeah.
No excavation. They're gonna set it
Yeah,
right on top
blasting
of the
rocks
granite
and-
rock.
Yeah.
Okay,
It would take drilling and dynamite to excavate.
Right.
We're not planning on that.
So that was just a question I had.
If I may ask a clarifying question, Mr. Chair. So for example, on page 9 of the staff report, Ashley and Victor, I don't know if you remember, it's kind of like at the base of the hill and you can like see the orange tape. So a condition saying no excavating, my thought was that you were at least going to be pulling some of that material out. I just want to be clear, because if it got approved that condition, I would need to work with you to explain what that is. So I want to be sure we're all on the same page. So planning or board adjustment member Giesecke, are you suggesting that all of that material should stay exactly as it is and everything is just kind of on stilts up on top of it? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm suggesting there's no excavation other than removing the vegetation from right underneath the footprint of the house. That's all I'm saying. I was just, once you start blasting and doing things like that, you start to change things, and if they're not gonna do that, I would approve it.
Okay. Okay,
I'm
Well-
familiar,
go ahead.
I'm familiar with the property and, I know the neighborhood pretty well, and it seems like a very reasonable use of the property and the less disturbed, the best.
Okay,
So I'll make a motion, we approve the variance request with the conditions specified.
okay, the motion has been made to approve. Is there a second?
I wanna know if we should add that or not.
Was
So the motion
was
is
that,
just
is that a
with the
second?
condition.
Yeah.
With the conditions that posted in here.
Right, that was her motion.
It's my thought would be, can I speak?
Sure.
I don't know that that condition would really be necessary, given, I mean, if we wanted to add something to your concern, it would be that no blasting would be. That would allow, that would, I think, give your concern
I don't
without,
think there's much to excavate.
No,
Limiting.
that's why. Make it,
if they gotta move. the
I would
gravel
approve it
to
with that,
Get the foundation just right,
right?
so.
I like the idea.
So I've made the motion with the conditions specified by staff.
I'll second it.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded now. So we have a motion on the floor. Are there any further comments on this? Hearing
Yeah,
none,
there-
I'll assume we're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Neva needs to comment.
Eva wants to talk to you.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify the potential condition that there's some discussion on. I don't think it was adopted, and I wanted to be sure about that. There was like no blasting and no, just the conditions as proposed in the narrative, right? Thank you very much.
We can vote.
Okay. Any comment on that? Well, sir, we're ready to vote then. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. And the order is out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't get to play with dynamite though?
Please
I
don't
move we
mess
adjourn.
everything up.
Second.
Motion has been made to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I'm gonna sign off.